Hi, this is Jacob again, and if this is your first time watching any of these videos, I try and make Samoan grammar or Samoan language grammar videos. Again, I'm kind of targeting those that are coming from an English-speaking background that are interested in learning Samoan, whether they be someone of Samoan descent or they've got friends and family that are speaking Samoan and they would like to be able to get closer to them and be able to develop those relationships. Very quick background, try and give this in every lesson. Again, I've got other videos. If this is the first time you're watching one of my videos, I would highly suggest you click on the link above, which will take you to a playlist of other videos that'll start at more elementary levels. But again, I learned Samoan as a 19, 20-year-old serving as a missionary in Samoa, so I definitely came from a native English speaker background. And again, I'm trying to explain some aspects of the language that might be more difficult to just pick up on your own by trying to speak it, and would probably be more difficult for a native speaker to explain just because that's not how they learned to speak the language. So today's lesson, with that being said, is going to be on what are called imperatives, or you can think of these as commands, and I'll explain a little bit more about what those are. So kind of, again, got a little bit of a table of contents here, or lesson topics. We'll talk about what an imperative is, and how you can use imperatives or the imperative sentence structure. We'll also talk about one-word imperatives, and again, I'll explain that. And then, like with every video I've got, I do suggest that you find a way to practice and apply these things. It really won't do you any good unless you find some way to incorporate this into something you're doing every day, or at least once a week. So again, I really encourage you to find someone to be able to speak Samoan with, whether it be someone who's learning with you, or probably better yet, someone who already speaks Samoan, and you can kind of try these things out and they can correct you, and you can kind of learn, grow, and develop. I'll also point out that I'm not going to give a ton of vocab in these videos, so I really encourage you, if you're serious about learning the language, to get a Samoan language English dictionary, and really try and look up words of things that you would actually want to say, or can say in your everyday language, so you can kind of incorporate it all the time. All right, that being said, what is an imperative? So in English grammar, an imperative is considered to be like a mood of a verb. So it's not like a verb in and of itself, but it's really kind of an aspect of a verb. So, but more or less, it's a way of communicating that verb in a command form, as opposed to trying to describe it or anything else. So for example, the phrase sit down is an imperative. It's a command. And I just want to point out that in English, there's no special conjugation of the verb. Like, in other words, the verb in that sit down sentence, sit is the verb, and there's nothing special that we're doing there in terms of conjugation. So it's not like in a special tense, it's still in the present tense. It's conjugated for a person being spoken to in the second person. So the verb doesn't really change much, but it's our phraseology and the sentence structure that really conveys that it's a command. In Samoan, though, that imperative mood is really affected by what I'm going to call imperative markers. And these imperative markers, they take the place of regular tense markers. Again, if you're listening to this and you're thinking, what in the world's a tense marker? Go back up to that playlist and look up the video I did on simple verb sentence structure, and you'll get an introduction to tense markers there. So, but just as a quick recap, in Samoan, really, technically speaking, you really should never have a verb that isn't somehow connected to a tense marker. One of the exceptions might be is if it's connected to an imperative marker, and really that's because an imperative marker, it's basically happening in the present tense. You can't command someone sort of in the future. Commands are kind of immediate. And so these imperative markers really, they follow the same sentence structure that you would ordinarily have. It's just instead of a tense marker, you drop in one of these imperative markers. And in Samoan, there's really two of these. So the first one is sei. And I guess I should highlight these things as I go along. So the first one is sei. And really this is, of the two that I'm going to introduce here, this is the softer one. This is more of what you might use to convey a request So it's not like a harsh command. It's not like you're mad or anything like that. It's more of like an invitation, like, hey, won't you please sit down or something. So actually, yeah, the example I've got here is se'i e no fui lalo. Se'i e no fui lalo. So again, what we're using here is actually the imperative marker here of se'i. E in this case, let's see here. E is the descriptive pronoun for you, singular. And then no fui lalo is our verb and then prepositional phrase. So nofo is to sit, y lalo is down. It's to down. It's kind of the way that it would translate. And again, you're not really saying please in that sentence, but because you're using se'i, it's a little bit more polite. It's less of a you must do. It's more of like won't you please. But notice that the sentence structure of like tense marker, descriptive pronoun plus verb, it still holds. It's just instead of tense marker, we're dropping in the imperative marker. The second imperative marker that we'll talk about is ia, ia. And notice there's actually a glottal stop in front of that I there, because it's a little bit punchier, you starting this one. Anyway, like I said before, ia, it conveys just a stronger tone in that command. So the same sentence of, instead of saying se'i e no fui lalo, if you were to say ia e no fui lalo, it's much more of a stern command. It's like sit down. That's someone like really telling you, you better sit. So ia e no fui lalo. But notice the sentence structure is the same. It's just we're swapping one imperative marker in for another. So the nice thing here is you don't have to learn a new sentence structure. You just have to add basically 2 substitute tense markers in for these commands to work. Now, just real quick, it's not to say that people, that Samoan speakers don't ever say no fui lalo, sit down. You still absolutely hear that, and you hear people say fa, which means listen. They still say that just like we would in English. We sometimes just say sit. We don't say you sit all the time. But properly, and I think oftentimes you hear this being said properly. You hear this imperative marker to begin with. A lot of these later videos that I've been doing, I don't want people to stress out over memorizing a million things. I'm introducing these things because you will hear them, and I don't want you to be caught up on it. But in a pinch, you use what you have, and for the most part, it'll probably be well understood. So anyway, like I said before, the sentence structure that you would use here is actually consistent with the descriptive pronoun verb sentence structure that you've heard before, which is tense marker, descriptive pronoun, verb, and plus prepositional phrase, except now you're just, instead of a tense marker, you're using the imperative marker. And then theoretically, you could also put this in for any other sentence structure. It's just that most of the time, you're going to be using descriptive pronouns, because if you're giving commands to someone, you're not giving commands to some random boy that's not even in the room. The boy must sit. Well, that's not a command. You have to be talking to somebody to command them. So for the most part, you really are going to be in the descriptive pronoun space. And for the most part, that descriptive pronoun is either going to be you dual, or you plural. It could be us as well. But it's not going to be I, and it's not going to be them, and it's not going to be he, she, or it. So it's going to be like se'i e no fui lalo, se'i lua no fui lalo, se'i lua no fui lalo, or se'i to no fui lalo, se'i to no fui lalo. So that's you in singular, dual, and plural. Anyway, again, if that was really complicated, I would say go back to those other videos, and you can kind of refresh yourself on those pronouns and that sentence structure. All right, so similar to English, some imperatives are really just conveyed in a single word that can stand alone, but they can also be incorporated into phrases. And so the 2 that I'm specifically going to talk about in this video is going to be awa and soia. So I would imagine that if any of you that are watching this video grew up in Samoan speaking households with Samoan speaking parents, and maybe you didn't necessarily pick up the language fully, but you probably know these 2 words. And just because growing up in any household, you'd probably learn their equivalents in whatever language you guys are speaking, just because kids are kids. So awa. Awa is the first one. Awa is don't. And again, it's not really quite a verb. That's why I'm kind of introducing it as like a single word imperative, because it can stand alone. And you'll hear this all the time. Parents will be talking to their kids, be like, awa, awa. Don't do that. Whatever they're doing, awa. But you can also incorporate it into phrases. The way that you would do this is the way, at least I'm looking at it. It's one of three different ways. You can say awale and then follow that with usually a verb. And what you're kind of doing is you're kind of treating the verb like a noun. Le really means the in Samoan. So if you're saying, the example I have below is awale pisa, awale pisa. Pisa is actually a verb to make noise and to kind of make a racket. You putting le in front of it kind of treats it like a noun, and awa just means don't. So this is saying just don't make noise. Awale pisa. If you were to say awa nei and then put the verb down, this is, I guess in my mind at least, I translate this to be a little bit stronger. This is almost like don't you dare, whatever that verb is. So awa nei pisa, and you might even say awa nei pisa oi. So don't you dare make any noise. Awa nei is just maybe a little bit stronger. The other way you can use awa is you can actually kind of incorporate it into a descriptive pronoun sentence structure. And actually, I'm looking at my slide right now. I've actually got a little bit of an error here. So give me 1 second. I'll kind of make the correction here. So really, right before we say te, we should put the descriptive pronoun. And I'll kind of demonstrate what that would look like. Sorry, this is terrible writing. All right. So really you would say, like if you were saying you don't do something, like if it's a mom talking to their one kid, they might say awa e te pisa. In this case, I'm using the verb pisa. And really what that means is like, don't you make noise. Awa e te pisa. You could also, if a mom was talking to her two kids, she might say awa lua te pisa. And lua is just the descriptive pronoun for you too. And if she was talking to her 3 or more kids, she would say awa to te pisa. Awa to is the descriptive pronoun for you guys. Te pisa. Te is just the present tense marker in that particular sentence structure. You could kind of flip this around to other sentence structures, but to be honest, they're just less common. Like you could use emphatic pronouns, but it's just less common. It happens, but I would just suggest you think about these 3. So hopefully that makes sense. So you can say awale pisa or awane pisa, or you can say awete pisa, or whatever other descriptive pronoun you want to throw in there. The second one-word imperative that I introduce is soia. Soia means stop it or like knock it off. So again, I'm sure as a kid, if you grew up in a Samoan speaking household, you probably heard this quite a bit. It's primarily a one-word expression, so I feel like this was incorporated into phrases less often, but it still can be, and it's incorporated in a similar way. So you can put soyale and then put a verb in, just like we did for awale. So if you were making noise at the time, you could say soyale pisa, knock off the noise making, soyale pisa. But you really would never say soyane. That just doesn't. I've never heard that. I don't think it makes sense. You can also put, instead of le, which means the, you could also put a possessive pronoun in there as well. So you could say soielo pisa, and that means just knock off your noise making. So it's very similar to le. It's just instead of saying the, you're saying your, which if you haven't seen the pronoun and the possessive pronoun videos, again, I recommend you take a look at those. But in Samoan, possessive pronouns convey a lot of the same things that an article does. So that's why I view that as being similar. It usually just precedes a noun. So in both cases, le and the possessive pronoun are turning the verb into a noun, so to speak. So those are the ways that I would consider using awa and soia in sentences. The one example sentence, I guess I didn't touch on yet, for soia is soia lo fa'avaivai. Soia lo fa'avaivai. In this case, I'm using the word fa'avaivai, that's the verb, and that kind of means to quit. It literally translates to make weak. And we're using the possessive pronoun lo. So it's soia lo fa'avaivai, literally translates to stop your quitting. Don't give up is kind of what it's conveying. All right, so without further ado, practice. So again, what I would suggest here is hopefully you've got someone that you can kind of pair off with, because it'll be a lot easier that way. And then I'd suggest that you just take turns kind of drilling each other and practice giving each other the commands, and you kind of have to do the command. Sometimes incorporating that kinetic learning will just sort of help things stick. So what I've done here is I've put together a few different sort of Samoan phrases or words that could easily be incorporated into commands. And so I just suggest that you guys practice going back and forth. So like in other videos, I'll just pronounce the Samoan, then I'll say the English, and I'll kind of go left to right, if that makes sense. So first, tu ilunga, tu ilunga. Tu is to stand, ilunga is up, or two up. That just means stand up. So you can easily incorporate that into an imperative sentence. No fui lalo, like we mentioned in the previous slide, that means to sit down. Nofo is to sit, and ilalo is to down, or in the downward direction. Faitau letusi, faitau letusi. Faitau is to read, and letusi is the book. So you can ask someone to read the book or command them to read the book. Ki le moli, ki le moli. Ki is like just the word to turn on. Think of it like a car. You use a key to turn on the car. Same kind of concept. Le moli is the light in this case, but you could say ki le ili, which is like turn on the fan. You can use this for whatever, anything that turns on. Tali le telefoni, tali le telefoni. Tali is the verb to answer, and the telefoni, or le telefoni, is the telephone. That one's not too tough to figure out where they came up with that. Inu vai, inu vai. Inu is to drink, vai is water. So maybe you want to ask someone to drink water. Ta pena le fale, ta pena le fale. Ta pena le fale. Ta pena means to clean. Le fale is the house. Tani. Tani is to cry. So this doesn't sound very kind, but you could say, hey, stop your crying. Soielo tani. So I don't know, I didn't come up with a better example. Finau. Finau is to argue or to fight. So you can ask someone to not do that. And popole, you hear this all the time. Popole is to worry. And so you can say, hey, don't worry. Awa le popole. Awa ete popole. You probably have heard that phrase before if you've been around many Samoan speakers. Anyway, you can add anything you want to this. Any list of verbs can really fit or apply here. These are just some suggestions. Again, I really encourage you, find the translation of words that you actually would use, or that are something you can incorporate in your daily speech. If you need resources and where do I get new words, again, I'd recommend getting a Samoan to English dictionary. You can use Google Translate. It's not super reliable, but it's not bad. There's probably other resources online as well, so I'd just suggest that. Anyway, as always, if you like this content, if you want more of it, please leave a comment. Let me know what else would be helpful. Subscribe, thumbs up, all that stuff. Thanks, everyone. Bye.